Deliberations in Kenosha, Wisconsin at the trial of Kyle Rittenhouse. After days of discussion, there is still no verdict. But there was one shocking moment today with the judge announcing what he called a very serious matter. ABC's Terry Moran is there again for us tonight.
Tonight, a third long day of deliberations has come to a close. Jurors still working to determine the fate of Kyle Rittenhouse, charged with killing two men and injuring a third with an AR-15 rifle during violent protests last year. Rittenhouse says he acted in self-defense. But outside the presence of the jury today, a shocking moment in court.
I have instructed that no one from MSNBC News will be permitted in this building for the duration of this trial.
The judge bans MSNBC from the trial after Kenosha police say they pulled over a man affiliated with the network. He ran a red light near the bus designated for jurors and said he'd been told to follow it.
That is it's extremely serious matter.
NBC News issued a statement saying the freelancer never contacted or intended to contact the jurors during deliberations and never photographed or intended to photograph them, adding, "We regret the incident."
Terry Moran joins us now from Wisconsin. And Terry, I've heard from our producers here that from the beginning you were expecting this likely would not be a verdict until Friday. And now here we are, the jurors deliberating for more than 22 hours. I would love to hear, with all of your years of experience covering trials like these, can you read anything from the tea leaves as we await this verdict?
Well, I can try to read the tea leaves, Trevor. I should warn you, though, I'm often wrong about it. But what we do know clearly, based on what we've seen, is that this jury is working hard, right? From the beginning of their deliberations, they started by asking for the jury instructions, the law, the roadmap for their deliberations, and a copy for each of the jurors. One juror today asked if they could take it home. The judge said yes. They've also reviewed, as a group, a lot of the video evidence in this case, and there's a ton of it, right? All these three separate shooting incidents videoed from various angles. They've reviewed that. But today, interestingly, no questions from the jury, no requests for evidence, no questions on the law. They're hashing it out clearly. And it's a hard case. Look, you wouldn't know that. Everybody seems to have an opinion on this case on social media. Everybody's dead certain, right? But certainty is cheap on social media. It's hard-earned in the jury room, and that is what they are doing. They are working hard to see if they can come to a verdict.
Which is all we can ask them to do, Terry, with the world watching and waiting for that verdict. Terry Moran in Wisconsin, thank you. And as we continue to wait for that verdict tonight, we want to bring in Susan Hughes. She is the great aunt of Anthony Huber, who was the second person that Kyle Rittenhouse shot and killed. Ms. Hughes, we are very sorry for your loss. We appreciate you joining us tonight.
Thank you.
I would just like to ask first and foremost, this would be difficult enough what your family is going through without international attention and a heavily divided populace where everyone has opinions. How are you and the rest of Anthony's family holding up right now?
Everyone is tired. I mean, and there's only a small group of us that I'm talking about anyway. Although I personally have a lot of cousins all over the country and world. So, randomly I hear from that cousins in Germany are following the trial. That's been surprising. One of your ABC colleagues from Chicago asked me this afternoon what had changed in my life. And, number one, I'm not accustomed to talking to national media every day. So that's been a jarring experience for me, and particularly for Hannah and for Carrie Ann as well. So it's difficult when you want to maintain some element of privacy and still take an opportunity to correct a lot of the misinformation that's out there.
Of course. On that subject, Susan, you testified here in this trial, and your testimony came to somewhat of an abrupt end. So I wanted to give you an opportunity to maybe expand on that, because the last question that you were asked was, had you ever seen Anthony run toward danger? And you said yes. Can you expand on what you meant when you said yes to that?
Yeah, I'll give you a little background of how I even recalled this. The day before Anthony died, he had called me and asked, we have a memorial bench for my son out in a county park, and Anthony and I would frequently go out there to talk. And he was concerned. He knew Jacob Blake. he wanted to talk about that. So we went out to the bench, and as we're talking, he talked about, his feelings about how Jacob's, arrest and things were handled in the shooting. But one of the conversation evolved, as it always did, kind of random. And he got on to talking about how people react in crisis. And, how some people run towards things, some people freeze in place. And he said, Aunt Susie, do you remember Liz's wedding? Liz is my daughter. And when my daughter was married, we had a backyard barbecue. And one of the things that happened that day was the propane tank for the barbecue ignited. And it let off a scream, like just chilling. And every adult in the place ran to the opposite side of the yard. And only a family friend who knew what to do, and Anthony, who was only 6 years old at the time, ran towards the tank. And they cooled it down with a hose and whatever. And he was chiding me. He said, and you, Susie, you stood there trying to figure out how everybody was going to get out of the yard because the gate was behind the barbecue. So it was like, I was the analytical person. He was the person who responded immediately. And that happened literally the day before he died, that conversation. So when I learned later what he had done that evening, I was horrified to find out that he had run to disarm the shooter, but I was not at all surprised. I remember the first thing that came to my mind was, yeah, of course. That would have been Anthony.
So your answer to that question wasn't to say that you'd seen him run toward danger because you'd seen him be aggressive. You meant it as that he'd been helpful in the past. Right,
yeah. He was and even in other small ways, he had recently moved back into the family home by himself. He was renovating that house. And his next door neighbor had a situation where she was getting tickets from the city for not taking care of her lawn. All the neighbors just looked at it, did nothing. Anthony, who had no money and no resources, scrounged around to find a mower to cut her grass so she wouldn't have to pay the tickets from the city. That he was very much, there's a problem in front of me. I know how to fix it. I'm going to go do it.
Kyle Rittenhouse has painted your nephew as the aggressor. And in his testimony the other day, everyone watched, he broke down in tears as he was telling the story of what happened that night. How did you feel watching that testimony?
I honestly did not feel that was a remorseful crime. That was, I'm caught. It makes me anxious. I'm having to deal with this in public. I'm emotionally crying, I never heard him say he was sorry. He did say he didn't want to kill one of the people he was asked about. I'm not sure if it was Anthony or Rosenbaum, but I didn't ever hear, I'm sorry, I take responsibility. That never came out of his mouth. There was just a lot of emotional churning like you see from a child. It was just reinforced for me that he was not emotionally mature enough to be in that situation in the first place. And he's not really emotionally mature enough to handle it and process it now. And he's not getting good reinforcement from the adults around him when his defense attorney says, Rosenbaum was a mentally deranged person, and I'm glad he killed him. And that was part of his closing argument. So, he responded to me that was, I'm trapped, and it's an emotional release.
Just a final question quickly, Susan. These trials are stressful enough. There's been so much that's come out of how this trial has been handled, whether it's be things that the judge has said, Kyle Rittenhouse picking jurors out of a hat. Now today, the judge announcing that media members were maybe following the jury. How have you felt about how this whole trial process has been handled?
Well, for one thing, I can't respond to what happened during the prosecution segment because I was a witness. I couldn't be there. And I couldn't watch it. I was there for closing arguments, though. That's when I first got to hear some stuff and have heard from people what went on earlier in the trial. Even today, when they asked for allowed the jury to take the instructions home, and after the jury was out of the room, the judge made a comment to the effect that they might be researching how to interpret the directions. Does that allow them to be on the internet? That's confusing at best, and I'm not a legal expert, but that made me uncomfortable.
Totally understandable. Susan Hughes, we really appreciate your time. Thanks so much for talking through all that with us. And regardless of the verdict, we wish your family the best.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.